My guest today on the podcast is a guy that I have known for at least 3 minutes, and probably the funniest story of anybody that's ever come in here to interview about anything. It's Jake Woolsey. So first of all, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
This is so funny. So I'm just going to tell our origin story. I flew back from Dallas. I had golfed in Houston, landed in Dallas. I didn't tell you this part, but they lost my luggage.
No way.
Yeah. And so I had to go shopping for clothes, which is like my favorite thing. Like, I hope they don't bring my luggage because I have this deal where you can, like, most people don't know this, but you could just go shopping and then bring your receipts and then they'll refund it.
Right.
And so I had gone shopping. So I bought some clothes at the Nike store out in Houston. So in Dallas. I went Houston, Dallas, home. And so Jake walks up to me at baggage claim. I'm standing there and you said,
I like your hat. Like, you played, I thought it was Pumpkin Ridge, I think, at the time, but it turned out to be Bandon.
Yeah. And you're like, are you a golfer? And I was like, yeah, which just lit up a conversation.
Yeah.
And cool conversation of just like different golf courses. And you're like, you remember OGC, right?
Yeah. Oregon Golf Club.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could golf with this guy. What a great dude. And then you handed me your card and you're in real estate.
Wild.
And I was like, that's so crazy. And so my immediate thought was, one of Avery's friends is becoming a realtor. So I was like, this guy could be great talking to him. And then my thought was, I wonder if he, like, as I drove away, I'm like, I wonder if he would be willing to go on camera. Cause you said something to me. I was like, it still is sinking in. You've been in real estate how long?
12 years? No, 11 years actually.
And
I want to give myself
that
extra year. But,
yeah.
I'm 29. So right when I was like 17, 18 years old, got in.
Which is crazy. And the other thing that amazed me is you had a good attitude about real estate. And right now in real estate, you don't see a lot of people that are like, yeah, I love my job. Like, this is great. And so as soon as I drove away, I texted Claire a picture of your card. And I said, hey, you need to reach out to this guy. Like, this guy would be great to come in and do some training. Then the more I learned about you since then, the more I realized this is a great podcast. You've got a really good story. And I'm actually fascinated and really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
On your way in, we pulled up YouTube. Mm-hmm. Like, we always like to research people we don't know. Sure. Like, okay, who is this guy?
Sure.
And it was so funny. We found not a protest really, but more of a rally you spoke at, and then a school board meeting you attended.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Chad and JT fan. I don't know if you know those guys.
Yeah.
But I love watching people testify in front of school boards and city councils.
Yeah.
Start there, man. What was that?
Man, honestly, what was that, 14 years ago or so?
Mm-hmm.
No, it was a lot of fun. That was Reynolds was going through. That's where I went to high school, Reynolds High School, in Troutdale. I don't claim that very often, but it's where I'm from. We were going through a couple things. Our principal got found out to be embezzling funds, and we didn't know that at the time, but we knew he was under investigation for some sketchy stuff. Then the teachers were negotiating for a new contract. And at the time, you're going towards graduating high school, and you have this strong sense of like, hey, these teachers have been there all 4 years of my life in high school so far, like, they're in the right. So went through, the process of trying to support them and rallying the students around them. And, it was a really good life lesson, to go after what you're passionate about. So
why you though? Like, why were you the one? With that many kids in school, 200 people showed up to see you, call them out. Yeah. Why you?
Probably because I was the only one that had the courage to do it. I mean, there was a lot of people, the feelings that we all had weren't unique to me, but the ability and I guess nobility to act on it, I think were, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you had the support, because any kid, I mean, you kind of have to have some support to do something like that. So who were you in high school that you were the one that was the likely candidate to go out and do that?
Man, great question. I played basketball. So I wasn't like a popular kid. I wasn't at the popular kid parties. I've always kind of prided myself on wanting to sit at the adult table. Even when I was a little kid, I remember, all the kids would be playing in the backyard and I wanted to be with the dads. So I've always been a little bit further along for my age than, I would like to say I'm the oldest 29-year-old you'll ever meet right now. So I think everybody kind of sensed that when there was a lot of things going on that nobody understood. Nobody really understands when you're 16 the finer points of negotiating a teacher's salary. Right. But I did. So I think I've always had the ability to interpret, what's going on above me to people below me. So in a way, like a middle manager role, but it's more leadership based than that. So I think I could, from a 30,000 square foot perspective, see what was going on and kind of articulate to everybody else. And they're like, well, you should articulate the students' thoughts for us. So I think that's probably how that came along. I wouldn't say it was like it's a no-brainer, you should do it. But over and over again in my life, I've found that I end up being the mouthpiece for things that might be uncomfortable.
Right.
But it's always pushed me out of my comfort zone to do that.
First of all, I'm not going to spend any time on this. I just think it's hilarious that you said from a 30,000 square feet perspective, because it tells me you're in real estate, because that's a 30,000 feet perspective.
Yeah.
You're like, everything is square footage.
Yep.
But also it is interesting. So you have that quest for justice. You want to see justice happen. And so you stepped up. In the rally, you actually said, I wouldn't even be able to stand here without my teachers having taught me how to, speak. So even when you're up there making a difference, and it almost in that speech, because the speech was after the student council thing, right?
Yeah.
So in that speech, it's almost like you kind of knew that you had done something that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But you also passed that credit back to the teachers.
Yeah.
You were advocating for the teachers. So it seemed like it was important to you to go, let's remember that these are the people this is about, which takes that spotlight off you, which also isn't normal for somebody that's done something big. Have you always pushed credit?
Yeah, I don't know that I wouldn't say that it's selfish to want to take credit for stuff always. If you do something incredible, I think that you should be comfortable with yourself in that achievement. And I think there are times and places to do it. In that moment, I know instantly I just wanted to get off that stage, because that one was a little bit more uncomfortable than the student council, because I had the students with me at the student council, or the school board meeting, I should say. I'm trying to think back to that rally. That one was more like, all right, these teachers they're going to miss graduation. Everything's going bad. I was more kind of trying to make them feel better about the situation. Because in a way, what they were doing was selfish, asking for more money, doing all that stuff, and they're advocating for themselves at the expense of students, which a lot of the school board and a lot of the parents would suggest was selfish. But, I think I was just trying to raise their morale a little bit. As far as pushing credit off goes, there are, any leader knows that he's only as good as his weakest person on the team. So I've always said, like, success, you're able to raise your lowest person on the team. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
You're able to raise the morale, the confidence of the people that are on your team that might be performing lower by giving them some credit in public, I should say.
Yeah. All right. So you get out of high school. Let's track with this. You got into real estate how?
My mother-in-law was a realtor. I would give her less credit than that. I would say when I was 12 and my parents bought their first house, I thought the guy that had the keys to all the houses in the area was the coolest dude in the world.
Wow.
So I was always kind of helping him, open the lockbox or whatever. I think it was Supra lockboxes back then. You had the little Bluetooth thing and you'd hold it up and it'd drop the key down. I thought that was so cool. And then we ended up buying a house and we moved out of a duplex where we were sharing, my brother and I were sharing a room. So, obviously that guy unlocked and helped my parents move into that house, which was great. It was like rock star. I get my own bedroom now. So I think that experience, again, I wanted to sit at the adult table. I didn't want to do what the kids that I show houses to right now, like they just go run off. Like I wanted to follow the realtor around and see what the important guy was doing. So I think that kind of imprinted in my life. And then, it just kind of always felt like destiny a little bit. There was a time where I wanted to be like a sports radio host. I did an internship at 750 The Game, I think is what it is. With, I think John Canzano was there and then a couple of the other guys. And I still would love to do that. I'm a big sports fan, but real estate pays the bills a little bit better than radio.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's awesome. So you get in, and you have a lot of family in real estate. So as you get in, you had some support.
Yeah.
You said my mother-in-law was a realtor. You were what, 17, 18 at the time. You're dating the same person that you're married to now. So you've been together how long?
I met Alexis, my wife, when we were 15. I actually liked her friend and ended up, her friend and I didn't end up working out. And then Alexis commented on one of my Facebook pictures. It's actually a funny picture. I have an afro on and like an extra small Shaq jersey on, and it was for a school project. And she said cool hair with a winky face. So it's like one of the original Facebook relationships.
Oh my gosh.
And I told her friend, I was like, hey, why is your friend hitting on me? And she's like, she's not. She just thought the wig was funny. And I'm like, well, if you don't think she's hitting on me, give her my phone number. And sure enough, like a half hour later, Alexis texted me. So
wow.
Yeah, it kind of felt meant to be. I still feel that way.
Yeah. How old were you when you got married?
Oh man, 2017. So 5 years ago, 25,
okay.
24.
Okay. So Reynolds is done. You move on. I didn't, for some reason, remember this, but it came up in our conversation earlier. Reynolds has a shooting right after you leave. Mm-hmm. Your brother's a senior. Mm-hmm. Where were you? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think I was at home, which was Fairview at the time. I saw that it happened, and obviously that was only 2 years after I had left, so I knew a lot of people there still. My brother, it was towards the end of the day, so he wasn't anywhere close to the shooting, but a lot of the people that I know, because it happened in the gym, so all the athletics background that I had there, all of those people were involved. So I remember getting a text from him like, hey, I'm fine. And then obviously more and more details started to come out, and obviously shocking and really sad that, you know, the kid that did it's life spiraled to a point where he felt the need to do that. I think in many ways we need to be better about being more sensitive where people are in their lives to avoid those kind of things. But, you know, one of my football coaches was the teacher that got shot in the hip. I mean, obviously we're talking inches away from probably not being alive today, but really heroic to try and run away from the shooter with his back turned to him. And then the shooter obviously holed himself up in a bathroom and it was over at that point. But yeah, I remember, you know, that was super close to home, obviously, because it just was a place that I left, but you know, it seems like it's everywhere these days. So
Did you reach out? Like, did you insert yourself into that situation at all? Or you just kind of stood back and made sure your brother was okay?
Yeah, I stood back. We had graduation was 2 or 3 days before or after that shooting. So,
oh my gosh.
You know, we were just trying to focus on celebrating my brother and all of his friends, and my brother's friends are basically my brothers too. So, he's got some real close friends that have hung out, and we still, they were in my wedding, and we still hang out and go to Seahawk games and stuff like that all the time. Mm-hmm. So we were focused on making sure that they, you know, had a great graduation and everything else was taken care of. And obviously, you know, the media turned that into like the biggest story, which is what they do. And that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, obviously a shooting at a local high school is a pretty big deal. But it kind of glossed over the kids that, had just got done graduating high school, which is a major accomplishment. So we just wanted to focus on them.
Yeah. All right. Fast forward to later on in life. So I don't know how many years later this was, but you're working at Nike, the employee store, another shooting, like enters your world.
Yeah.
So what happened there?
My wife was getting her hair done at the town center. I actually had a friend, that was shopping at Macy's too at the same time and saw the shooter run right past her, to the food court, which is super wild. But yeah, I was checking somebody out at the Nike store, you know, scanning shoe boxes or whatever. And, all of a sudden they mentioned like, hey, did you hear about the shooting at Clackamas Town Center? I don't even know if they were talking to me or if they were talking to their spouse or whatever, but, I heard it and dropped what I was doing and was like, I think Alexis is getting her hair done today. Which she would laugh now because I have no idea of any calendars or schedules. I'm the worst at that. In personal life stuff, work stuff, I'm great. But like, you know, I'll get told all the time, oh yeah, we have that thing tonight. And I'm like, oh, this is the first you're telling me, when it's not. I know that it's not. Yeah. But I went back and had like 35 missed calls from my family, her family, everybody else. So instantly thought the worst. And, you know, went in and told the head of store like, hey, I'm taking off. I think my wife was, you know, at the mall when that thing happened. And, obviously 205 was shut down. You know, the authorities shut down all of the cell phone service so they could communicate.
Oh, wow.
So couldn't get a hold of anybody, couldn't get anybody on the east side of town on the phone because the cell towers were down. Ended up finally like 5 minutes before I got to, my father-in-law's house where she was living at the time. Finally got there and she was safe and everything was fine. But Still super scary. She said it sounded like a bunch of sheet metal falling.
Mm-hmm.
She thought the roof had caved in, but then saw everybody running and it was like, all right, we should probably run too. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
And you were
too
just
very close to home.
You were just there for her and kind of helped her move through that. And then you just kind of went back to, all right, let's go back to life.
Yeah. I mean, it was weird. Her purse was still in there. So her cell phone, that's why I couldn't get a hold of her, text her. Cause it was like, everybody run for your life because nobody knows what's going on. So her purse, cell phone, car keys were all still in the hair salon. And 𝗲𝗲𝗃 County Sheriff, obviously that's an active investigation. So nobody was allowed in. And then like a week after it happened, they finally let people go in and get their stuff.
Oh my gosh.
So she went like a week without car, phone, purse, anything that was in there. So,
jeez.
Yeah.
Did you tie those together in your head at all? Or were you just like, all right, that's just another thing that happens?
No, I think I did. I think it was like, wow, that's like two very, very, very random things, seemingly, that happened to my brother and my wife, who were two of the most important people in my life. So I think I tied it together, but still like thinking about it now, like, yeah, very, very close to home. I think, it's super sad. I think it just underscores all the mental health stuff that we need to do as a country. We really need to spend more time, building community and building places where people feel safe to be themselves. Whether I agree with that, with who they are or not, they need to be safe somewhere. And I think, we can go deep and wide on all of that political stuff, but, Oregon is one of the states with the worst mental health, I'm guessing, at least from every other stat that there is. We definitely need to make more investments into that world to hopefully stop this from happening again. But it doesn't seem like politicians really want to do anything about any of it.
It's tough.
So
it seems like in situations you jump into problem solving mode pretty fast. Is that kind of your thing?
Yeah, I have to remind myself that not everything needs a solution.
Really?
Especially with emotion stuff. I've been asking myself a question all the time. It was a book that I just read. Fantastic book. It's called Driven by Dr. Doug Brackman. If anybody reads this book, there's a quiz on his website, I think. I took the quiz and I was a 98 out of 100 that I was a driven.
Oh, really?
So drivens end up being like Navy SEALs, high level business people. They go on to do amazing things, but without boundaries for those talents and skills and feelings, they can oftentimes be super self-destructive and be a nightmare to deal with. And in that book, one of the questions he says to ask, like, hey, is what you're feeling, an emotion, and emotions don't always need to be solved.
What?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. You can just live with your emotion and say like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. That's okay.
Yeah.
And, you have to learn where to draw the line of like, hey, that emotion needs to be acted on, or that emotion needs to be, just let run its course.
Right.
And everybody has a different way. For me, it might be golf sometimes, or, just watching or reading a book or something. But I've definitely over my life seen my share of problems, jumped into trying to fix them, even if they're much bigger than me. It might not always be the best thing, because there are certain small problems that I probably overdo. But with the bigger stuff, I've never been afraid to jump in and try and fix it, or at least help how I can.
How have you navigated that in marriage? Because that's been a struggle for me.
Yeah. As far as like
solving problems.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is communication. Obviously, if you're to the point where you're married to somebody, you probably know how they operate. You can kind of read the nonverbal cues and kind of understand. And I think, one of the things that my wife and I do all the time is like, what's wrong? Nothing. Well, something's wrong. Well, nothing's wrong. And then like something will be wrong. And then it's like, well, this is what's wrong. And it's healthy to communicate what's wrong. But sometimes it can be, like I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I don't want to say anything. I'm also very direct. So if there is something wrong, I've always said like, hey, like just tell me and I'll fix it, or I'll do my best. My wife does the same thing. So I think it's just, knowing your spouse and being able to, my grandpa, who is a pastor, said, major on the major, minor on the minors. So like the stuff that matters, let's actually give it time and let's fix it and let's put some effort into it and, talk to a counselor or talk to somebody about it. But the stuff that, might be able to be more easily forgiven or just needs like a 1 or 2 minute conversation, like let's spend the 1 or 2 minutes and then move on. So it's all discretion. It's all trying to give weight to what needs weight and then, releasing the stuff that doesn't. So resentment doesn't creep in.
I love that. Major on the majors and minor on the minors. That's super smart.
I use that across the board with so many things.
Yeah.
So many things, not just relationships or problem solving. Like, anything you could say, is this a major or is this a minor? If it's a major, then we need to spend some time on it. If it's a minor, then we just need to let it go and move on.
Wow. All right. So you get into the real estate business in a year that, let me think of how the market was doing back then, coming out of a recession. So we were coming out of the great 08, 09, 10 crash. You get in and just dive in. I imagine creating a plan, like figuring all your stuff out pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I worked under my mother-in-law, doing signs and just basic stuff. My dad said something really good to me in the very beginning, which was just like, you got to view this as going to college. When you're 18 in real estate, who the hell is trusting you with $400,000, $500,000? At the time it was, my first sale, I think was 179.5 and the appraisal came in at 175.
Oh my gosh.
The listing agent at the time, Roger Huff, who's one of my good friends in real estate now, him and I had to navigate like a low appraisal on my first transaction. So that was interesting. I think my commission check ended up being like $1,500 after my split with Remax at the time. But I thought I was rich. It was so funny.
Oh yeah.
I went to the mall and did whatever I could. But,
oh my gosh.
But it was good to see, my mother-in-law operate. She's good at her job. She sells in Hawaii now in Maui. So, but she ran a good real estate. She did a lot of transactions, which was fun to see up close and personal what that looked like. But ultimately, like I always had the age thing, fighting me at the time. So, it didn't take off as quickly as I would have wanted to. It probably took me 4 or 5 years to see that traction and getting some deals enough to at least feed myself and live a comfortable life.
What was it about your age? Besides, you don't know a lot of people that are, your best friends aren't crushing it yet in life and ready to buy a house. Yeah. Besides that.
Yeah. I'll say it this way. My mother-in-law was a rainmaker. I think she was really early on in the Zillow thing. I think she had the entire city of Happy Valley for like $200 a month.
Wow.
So, that was where all of her transactions were coming from. She also did a lot of open houses and stuff like that. But really, from a system standpoint, from a running a real estate business standpoint, from all of that, she wasn't doing much of that. She didn't need to. She was killing it in other ways. Unfortunately, if you're not a rainmaker, you're not in your mid 40s, you don't have a community of people that are buying and selling houses that you can easily insert yourself into. It takes different skills and abilities and talents and disciplines. And that's where I'm at now. I have all that stuff. But at the time, I thought, well, all I have to do is exist and wake up the next morning and something will happen. Well, that doesn't happen, especially when you're 22, especially when nobody is buying a house. Even now, like hardly anybody I know can afford a house at my age, with rates in the mid 6s and 7s and prices being where they're at. So, it has been, I would say too, for the age thing, like the way I look, I've always looked like a baby.
Yeah.
I'm like,
can you grow a beard?
I can.
Okay.
I've looked at, I read a book about a year ago that said that none of the presidents and like virtually none of the Fortune 500 CEOs have beards. So I decided to just shave after that. Cause it's like,
really?
Yeah, that's what
didn't Abe Lincoln have a beard?
Yeah. There was like 2 of them. I think it was Abe Lincoln and like Grover Cleveland or somebody like that.
You actually looked this up?
I did. Yeah, I did.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Like, that's so interesting.
Cause I'm a sicko. I don't know.
There's something there. Like you want to do everything that makes sense to do.
Yeah. Logic. Yeah.
So you looked up how many CEOs and presidents have beards, and you went, I'm going to shave my beard because it doesn't line up with who I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that was simply like, it wasn't my idea, but the book said it like, hey, or maybe it wasn't a book, it was a video or something, some form of content that came into my life at the time said like, hey, beards aren't for high performing salespeople or business people. That's not to say that there aren't high performing realtors out there with beards. Like, not at all.
Right.
There's so many different ways to cook a pie in real estate.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not where I want to go. So just shave it off. Doesn't matter. My
Which
wife
then
was
makes
happy.
you look younger.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
my wife hates my beard. So I totally get that.
it does make me look younger. But at this point, the age things, it doesn't matter. I know an agent in Vancouver who's 22 and she's killing it.
I think I know about who you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
she's crushing a lot of people.
She's one of my best friends. She's
really?
just killing it. She's absolutely awesome.
From what I've been told, it's driving some agents crazy because
Yeah.
they're like, who is this new person? Like, there's going to be that.
Yep. She's a junkyard dog. She does what they don't want to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you first started doing it, so you weren't successful right out the gate. You don't like not being successful because from what I know, just by talking to you, that you're going to be successful and there's a way there. How do you deal with the disappointment of walking in? Because there had to be a moment where you're like, I thought this would be easy. What the heck?
Yeah. I mean, I thought I'd have a Lambo by the time I was 22.
Nice.
I mean, I'm serious. If you could put me in a time machine and interview me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, oh yeah, I'll have a white Lamborghini by, 18 months from now.
Oh my gosh.
But that's a lot of that's just youth and ignorance and, being 22 and thinking you know what you're talking about when you don't.
Yeah.
I would say, what was the question again? I forgot.
Yeah, how'd you deal with disappointment?
Yeah,
you didn't have a Lambo.
Yeah. I mean, disappointments, it's all about expectations, right? So the expectation at the time was like, hey, let's get the Lambo. And ultimately, like, that was a bar that I set myself. The book that I just read, the Driven book, talks about it. Like, for people like me, we create these false hurdles, these false, I think he says flagpoles, where we have to climb to the top. And the reality is, once you get to the top of the flagpole, even if you get the Lambo, you're not going to be happy. And then ultimately you're always waking up every day. I'm not at the top of the flagpole, but knowing in my heart that, like, hey, when I do get to the top, I'm not going to be happy. So I'm going to have to build another taller flagpole. And it's this vicious cycle of not being happy, not being content, not ever getting what you truly want. Right. Which is peace and just a happy family and, obviously wealth and everything else that comes with it. But, it hasn't been always easy. There was a solid 2 years there, probably when I was 19, 20, too proud to ask for help for anybody. But like, lunch was Costco samples and dinner was a quarter of a Costco rotisserie chicken. My office was right next to Costco. So I walked over there and had lunch, and it was like, some days it was like a red vine sample or something stupid, or like, they'd have like little like chicken wontons that they were sampling. And then you'd go around twice to try and get more so you could eat. But like, it hasn't always been easy. Now, we have the ability to be extremely generous with people, generous to our church, generous to the people that are in our lives. But not having been through those tough times, I don't know that I would have developed that spirit of generosity that I have. Disappointment is it's all about expectations. I really believe that deeply. And even though, like, right now I'm not where I want to be at, there's still disappointment that I'm not, where I want to be, but like, I know it's coming and I'm much more equipped to handle it because of my expectations now. It's like, my expectations are wake up and be better every day. Every single day, be a little bit better than yesterday. And if you stack enough of those on top of each other, eventually good things are going to happen. And who am I to think that, like, that process that's been, the same in everybody else that's been successful's life is going to be any different for me than it would be for them.
So funny. I said something one time. Normally when you say something, you kind of know a reaction you might get. And sometimes it spins where people give you the wrong reaction, or a reaction that's different than what you thought. And I remember saying to somebody, one of the greatest things in my life is I always look at last year, Ken, and go, I was such an idiot. And I hope I'm not an idiot this year, but I don't feel like an idiot this year. But next year I'm going to be like, wow, I was such an idiot. And when I said that, I remember the people I was with were like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you don't feel like you were an idiot last year? And they're like, no. And I'm like, is that just me? So it sounds like that's what you strive for as well. Because if I look at last year and go, I was so much better. I never, like, that's my biggest nightmare. Is that I can look back a year ago and think that was a better version of myself. That
you regressed or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, that takes, if I wake up every day and want that to be my goal, then my expectation is I'm going to learn a lot, which means that I dive into learning. You read Driven. I imagine reading is one of the things you just do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What else? I mean, besides reading, how else do you get better?
Yeah. Coaching. I'm in the Tom Ferry organization. So I have a coach now who is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
She understands where I'm at and what I want, and pushes me gently towards that, which is good. Gently and firmly. Sometimes I need both.
You do, from a coach.
Yeah.
If a coach is just going gently, you don't have the right coach.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would say, being involved in church is huge. That helps my personal growth and helps me be a better person. I also think I've always sought out mentorship. And there's a difference between wanting a mentor and actually using a mentor. And this is a key distinction too, even with coaching. A lot of people that are in Tom Ferry coaching, hey, I've got a coach. Okay, cool. What did they tell you to do last week? Oh, they told me to make my phone calls and do all this stuff. Well, did you? Well, no, I got a little busy. Okay, well, then you just are attending a coaching call. You're not actually being coached. You've got Coach K's book on there too.
Yes, I saw him speak, and I got that after his seminar.
Yeah, I can't imagine that his players are, listening to everything he says in practice, going out in a game and shooting terrible shots, and they would be on the team for very long.
Right.
So same thing with mentorship. I've got mentors in nearly every aspect of my life: real estate, spiritual, marriage, everything else. And I regularly meet with them, and I actually listen to what they say and put it into practice.
Wow.
It doesn't matter what you learn. It doesn't matter how many books you read. If you do not actually do what the book says to do, you're wasting your time. It's an exercise in making your ego feel better.
At this point in your life, are you becoming a mentor as well?
I think that'll come. I think, I'd like to be a coach someday. I'd like to, in fact, when I was in 8th grade football, it was really random. Our assistant coach came up to me. He's like, "You're going to be a coach someday." And made no sense to me because I was the center on the team. Going to Reynolds, it means like if you're even remotely tall, you're going to be a center in basketball and you're going to be the center in football. And it means, it's so stupid. I should have been a tight end and I should have been like a small forward if they were preparing me for the future in sports. If I wanted to play.
Should have gone to Camas.
Yeah, I should have. Tell me about it, man. What I really should have done was played college golf. Anyway, or high school golf, I should say. Back to the point. I think, him saying that you were going to be a coach, even though it didn't make any sense to me at the time, it makes complete sense to me now. I want the best for everybody. And I feel like I can, uniquely push people's buttons and unlock their potential. But I think the best coaches are also the people that are most coachable. They're the people that are always looking for a different solution, always looking for a better way, and also looking for the ways to actually execute things in their own life. So yeah, I think mentorship will come. I'd love it. If anybody wants to be mentored, hit me up.
Yeah.
I'll give you everything I got. And I tell people that all the time.
Here's a big question I've been kind of figuring out. Like when I hear people say anybody can speak on a stage, I actually don't believe that. Like I believe that some people have a gift of speaking. Some people have kind of a gift of speaking, can nurture the rest and like survive on stage. And I think some people should not be on a stage. Like some people should never, Ben Carson being one of them. So I saw him speak. It's the first name that came to my head. I fell asleep during a speech. I think he did too.
He's got gifted hands.
Yeah. Some people should not be standing in front of large audiences.
Yeah.
And when it comes to like being an incredibly successful person, I believe that it takes the things that you've mentioned. I believe that it takes researching and reading and looking for those gems that like are going to make you a better human. Do you think people can learn those skills, or do you think the desire that you have to be better needs to be the beginning of it? Or do you think we can give people some skills to make them better?
I think that the great ones are great from the start. I think there's a lot of people that are great that throw away their talent. And it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of people who aren't great that work and make the most out of what they have.
Right.
So, we had a kid in high school who I won't name obviously, but most gifted athlete I've ever seen in person. But, we always used to say like he's got $1 million airport and a $10 control tower. And,
wow.
And the reality is that you have to have that inner sense of like, I need to keep improving. I need to stay better. I need to, keep going. You can't just rely on talent alone. Talent alone, I think, leads to burnout, leads to, not sustainable stuff. People that are talented can do flash in the pans. People that are talented and disciplined change the world. So I would agree that not everybody can, be one of the world changers. It does take a little bit of genetic, special, all that. Does that mean that everybody can't be their best version themselves? Absolutely not.
Right.
And I think we all have a responsibility to be the best version of ourselves, not only for ourselves, but for everybody else around us. Because if you don't walk into your gifting, you're robbing somebody else of the gift that you could have given them. And that right there is what fires me up more than anything. There's so many people that could change the world if they just decided to be a little bit better, and they're not doing it for whatever reason.
I did we do like a update video every week, and I talk about whatever is going on that week. And I did a whole video on 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. I don't know if you know 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏, who he is. Camas football player, ends up being quarterback, but starts at quarterback a little bit later. And so all the colleges already picked their guy for quarterback. And so he had all these options to go to any school that he wanted as like a linebacker or special teams or some of these other spots. He's like, I want to be a quarterback. And I'd love to get him on the podcast someday. But he ends up taking a community college gig to be a quarterback for community college because he's like, I just want to play the role I like. So he gets out there and he ends up, I think they took second in the country as a community college. He gets on with Oregon State and he's called the jackhammer. So if you need 3 yards, hand it to the jackhammer. He's going to get you 3 yards every single time. And he just got undrafted, I believe, and then got picked up by the 49ers right afterwards. Or he was late draft. But he's now a San Francisco 49er. And when you were talking about that, it's like he had skill, absolutely. But like his willingness to play any role you want him to play when he's on your team, and then his drive to be the best that he can be, that drive is such a huge part. I'm going to read that book, by the way.
It's so good.
Because that drive is like when you wake up every day going, I'm going to do this. Like this is going to happen and I'm going to figure out how to do it. That's just you have a step up on everybody else. And I also love that you said, if you do have that drive and you're not using it or you're falling short of what your potential is, like you're giving up that special thing that you have that like could take you to the next level. Or you're getting distracted in that way. I've been listening to a lot of Dame Dalla lately. And I'm so conflicted on Damian Lillard without making this a basketball podcast.
No, we can
I'm so conflicted because he's so driven and he's such a team player and he's everything you ever wanted in a guy on the Blazers. And then you see him demand to move just to Miami. And you go, that is inconsistent with who I know to be Damian Lillard. And when something like that happens, I still don't know where to put that. Because something happened that changed who he is, at least who we see him as.
I think, well, obviously none of us know what's going on behind the scenes.
Totally.
First of all, Jody should sell the team.
Absolutely. And has to at some point soon. And
I don't even know that it's so much Jody. I think it's Bert, the other bozo that's in charge. Ultimately, your greatness does rely on others.
Right.
So, that's why.
Say that again, because I want people to hear this.
Your greatness does rely on others.
Right.
And, in Damian Lillard's situation, he can't control who's put around him. And as unfortunate as that is, he sees the path forward now for him to be great and achieve what he wants to achieve is to go to the Miami Heat because they just won the championship. And I believe that if he would have asked for a trade 2 years ago, he would have picked Miami too.
Right.
I think he wants to live down there and that who wouldn't, right? If you're rich and an athlete, Miami's pretty much the best place to be in the world. But when you're an athlete, you are so relying on that GM, on the owner, on everybody else to put the pieces around you. I'm a Mariner fan. They never put the pieces around anybody. They're so cheap. They never do anything they're supposed to do. And ultimately it leads to turmoil. It leads to players wanting to be traded. It leads to all that. The unique application for us as realtors, mortgage loan officers, anybody that's listening to the podcast is we are actually in control of who we surround ourselves with. So we're not reliant on a GM. We're not reliant on an owner. We're reliant on our own ability to go out there and find the tribe that we need to make us better. That gives me a freedom to know that like I'm in control of who I'm around. I'm in control of the people that get to speak into my life and help me become better. Dame's not. So Dame has to take control of, his destiny in a way because he has given Portland probably more than we deserved.
Right.
Or at least he's given the ownership more than they've deserved. So
I love that you said behind the scenes we don't know. and I'm listening to the, I don't know if you listen to Business Movers. I imagine, okay, you'll love it.
Yeah.
Business Movers, and there's another one that they do, business, something else that's like the business battles, but the Business Movers, I'm listening to the one on Woz right now, or not Woz, on Steve Jobs.
Love Steve Jobs.
And his transition to Tim Cook. And so it's more about Tim Cook's, like, how do you take on that role from Steve and like become your own person? And it does get into your team. It gets into the impact of everybody around you and how do you overcome some of those things. But most importantly, how do you find yourself and like, what do I want? And then how do I wrap myself with people that, you know, are doing those things, like the people that can make me the best.
Yeah.
And sometimes eliminating, like there were roles at Apple that just, they were great with Steve and they weren't going to work with Tim. And he was strong enough to say that and then, you know, reroute.
Probably none so much more than Johnny Ive.
Yeah.
Johnny Ive was fantastic with Steve because Steve had the power to put him inside a box. But, you know, with Tim, it was like, let's come out with the butterfly keyboard, and the butterfly keyboard was a complete disaster.
Right.
So it's like, you know, not everything needs to be reinvented unless there's a reason.
And Johnny was like, we should make a watch.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
So as you're growing your real estate career, did you surround yourself eventually, like as you started growing, started seeing some transactions close?
Yeah.
How did you make sure you had the right team?
I moved brokerages pretty early on. I've bounced around quite a bit, just searching for new ideas, new perspective. You know, now I'm at Real, which is the best brokerage I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
Fantastic place. But yeah, I mean, probably 18 months in, I moved from Remax and my mother-in-law's, you know, under her wings to being on my own. That next move was an iconic move in my life because of the people I met at Better Homes and Gardens. Eric Post, the leader, was fantastic. Everybody else that was in that office, I still have deep relationships with. You know, we call each other all the time. And even though some of us aren't at that brokerage anymore, you know, we have a really good relationship of like, you know, hey, what are you doing for this? Like, how does this picture look on my listing? You know, we can kind of collaborate. So in a sense, that next move was me saying like, all right, I'm going to try and go out on my own and figure this out. But it also required me to find more mentorship. Real estate, and that's one of the things that I believe so much in, is either join a team or find a really good brokerage if you're brand new, because you do not know what you're doing. Unfortunately, and it's a hot button topic in agent world, is like, you know, the real estate test that we all take. It's like, hey, you know how many hectares are in an acre or whatever the flip they teach you. And then like, okay, now go fill out a contract. And we're like, wait, what? You know, like God. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So you really need, I think, a probationary period where you're under somebody, a principal broker, a more seasoned agent of maybe more than like 2 or 3 years that can say, you know, here's the things that you need to do. Here's how to write the contracts. Here's what the verbiage looks like. Here's the things to look out for. And I found that, you know, pretty heavily at Better Homes and Gardens at the time.
With Eric Post?
Yeah.
So you worked with Eric Post? Yeah,
he was the boss at the time. I think he owned the company. He might have owned it with a co-owner. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But Eric was, you know, running sales meetings and his door was always open if we had questions or wanted to build something.
I wonder if he has read Driven, because that is the most driven guy.
Yeah. I would be willing to bet he has.
Yeah.
He's very big into the personal growth stuff.
Yep. He was in the office last week. We actually brought him in and chatted AI.
Yeah, AI stuff. He's really big into that now.
I'm on a panel with him in the Northwest Mortgage Lenders Conference in Bend.
Yeah.
It's just the two of us talking about AI.
I love it.
And that guy, I mean, just an example of, if we're talking about what makes somebody successful, especially within real estate and mortgage, that drive of just like, I'm just going to do this. Like, this is going to happen.
Yep.
Is behind a lot of the most successful people I've ever met.
Absolutely.
And just that unwillingness to accept anything but what I was kind of out to get.
Yeah.
So your expectations now going forward in life and in business, have you adjusted your expectations? Do you want the Lamborghini now, or?
Selfishly, yes, but practically no. I think I'm more of a Porsche man now.
Oh, really? Okay.
No. Yeah, I think, you know, there's a balance of cash and prizes and practicality. You know, in a way, the last couple of years have allowed me to do a lot of the things I've wanted to do. You know, we go to Maui for 10 or 11 days a year. We, you know, we go on vacations. I drive a nice Volvo that I've really like and have always enjoyed. I bought a brand new truck and sold it. So I've had the ability to do some stuff that I've wanted to do and try out. I'm a member at a golf course. Like that was always a bucket list item for me, and made it happen before I turned 30, which was great. But now I think it's kind of pivoted towards like, the cash and prizes that are involved are a byproduct of helping people get what they want and making dreams come true. You help enough people with what they need and you'll end up getting what you need. And now, I'm much more interested in building a monster team and, trying to continue to scale things and get results for people, creating income for other people. All of that stuff gets me way more excited than cars and stuff now. In a way, I'm happy it didn't happen when I was 22. I'm really, really grateful for the journey that I've been on and everything that's happened in between. And when you're ready for a step up, you'll get that step up. I believe God has all of that in preordained and predestined and everything. He knows exactly where I'm going to be and when, and I just have to trust that that's the right path for me, which I do. And he knows the desires of our heart, which is what scripture says. So it's like, all right, he knows that I'd like to drive a Porsche someday. And if he sees to it that happens, that'd be great. And I'm going to do everything in my power that I can to do it. But really like that stuff's all secondary and selfish to what's really, gets me excited, which is creating opportunities for people to live their home ownership dreams out. Creating opportunities for people to work with me and under me, and get an income to support their families and do what they want to love. And then also be extraordinarily generous to the people and to the causes that we believe in, as a family, and move forward with that.
Yeah. I'm going to end with one question, and I don't know if you have an answer to it, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think back to failures you've had or things that didn't go the way you wanted them to go, and think of what your favorite one was? Like the one that if you would have been successful, it would have actually turned out horribly. But because you made a mistake or you failed at something you were trying, the route of your life is actually better now because of that.
Yeah. I think all of the things that I look back on and say like, wow, thank God that didn't happen, were due to boredom, due to lacking a purpose or a mission, or, maybe being frustrated with where I was at in my progression of my career and my situation. There was many times probably prior to 2020, prior to COVID, where I was like, wow, is this real estate thing really for me? I'm selling 7 or 8 houses a year. Like, yeah, I'm making a bunch of money and, not a bunch of money, but I'm making enough money as a mid-20s person to feel like I'm okay and ahead. But I really didn't see, the growth and progression that I felt was inside of me. So, there was a couple times where I almost took a job, in the golf industry, just working retail, a little bit more elevated. I wasn't like a sales associate or anything, but like, with a direct to consumer brand or something like that. There's been many times where, I've wandered on the path, just because of sheer boredom. And looking back on it, like with what I have in front of me now and all the opportunities that are ahead of me, thank God I didn't, because had I have taken that easy way out at the time, which seemed necessary or seemed, almost like this is what I need as a young person to, shift gears a little bit, I would say that thank God that none of that happened. I would also say too, like there's been temptations over the years to move cities, move states. I've only ever lived in Portland, so I don't know anywhere else. And that's part of the Driven book too. It talks about like the wandering gene that some of us have. The grass is always greener on the other side. There's going to be more fruit on the tree in the other city, which isn't true. Right. None of that's true, but it's all discipline to know your mission and stay where you're supposed to be. So I would say, that's probably the biggest mistakes that were avoided if I answered the question correctly. Yeah.
And that grass is greener. My wife always says the grass is greener where you water it. So yeah. Well, dude, this has been awesome. Yeah. I'm so glad. Now we've talked like 37,000 times more than we did just at baggage claims. Yeah. So I really appreciate it. And I think, when people talk on the podcast, I always try to envision the person that's going to get the most out of this conversation. And I think there's so much there for people feeling like right now they're down in the dumps or like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, what you've said is reset your expectations and go and figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And do you like this? Should you get out of it? And if not, like, what are you going to do to then grow and be better? And then focus on that. If next year is going to be better than this year, what does that mean? Yeah. And what do I need to do right now to get there?
Yeah.
So man, I appreciate your time.
Yeah. It was
Thank you
great.
so much.
Yeah.
Real pleasure.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.